the real reason we're here is I think it's a critical process of winning opportunities, of really connecting the proposal team with the capture team and with other elements of your overall company, the marketing and the business development. But I think there is a core need for connecting proposals with capture. So really what I want to go through this, what I would put together with Catherine and Ben, is really looking at a couple of elements of how we can connect internally and externally and really be able to have a structured growth moving forward. So I'm going to dive right into this. Please, we welcome your comments, your questions, and see how we can really kind of move forward with this. And let's jump into this. So I'm going to break this really into kind of really three core areas, because the capture manager is going to look at several areas, and it's really how do we focus internally from a capture side, and how we focus it on it externally, but also where we can actually look at a structured growth that combines both of them as well. So that's kind of how I wanted to put this overall together. So before we get into that, a little bit about my company. We're a sales and business development consulting and advisory firm where we help companies compete for and win business. And it's really around focusing on coming from the industry side and really increasing their potential for success. And the core areas we really focus on are the smart cities, the energy efficiency and infrastructure, and focusing on public sector opportunities, and not just federal, but also the state and local area as well. And then my personal favorite is focusing on the sports market as well, because you learn a lot about the customer, the needs, how to really bring the win those markets as well. So that's kind of my focus in those markets, but I do have a heavy presence focusing in the public sector. So a little bit of my background. I've worked for large companies and small, but also worked with startups and nonprofits. I helped develop the public sector business development team for Philips. We grew to about $100 million over a period of 24 months. And I've worked with the professional rugby team here in DC, and then Elbit System, Schneider Corporation. So I've worked with a bunch of different entities. So I've seen how to actually work as a capture manager from small opportunities to very large operations as well. So very different types of ones, from IDIQs to BOAs, task orders, but also working on performance contracts, which is a totally different animal as well. And lastly, I sit on the board of Society of American Military Engineers, based right here in DC. There's a large, there's posts, or we call them posts, people call them chapters, but there's posts all around the world. I sit on the board here, and I've worked, been certified with Shipley, and also done things with Miller Heiman. So that's a little bit about my my background. So it's definitely very diverse. I would say in the terms that's a little bit about me. So talking with Catherine, it was like, all right, where are we from this area? Where are the problems? And a lot of it is like, where can we really reduce the gap between the proposal efforts and the business development team, as well as the capture team? How can we close it? How do we get on the same page? And how do I position myself and my proposal team for more success? And where are their mitigation strategies? So one thing to really consider and look at is what is capture management? And that's all about a very disciplined approach about how to develop a win strategy to really be able to win your opportunities. So how do I increase my win rate? And that's just not looking at the customer, looking at the market, looking at the competitive intelligence. Those are all core factors of a capture, but it's also looking at the proposal angle. How am I going to write a proposal to ultimately be able to win? So I think that's a critical aspect of it, because that's really on the execution side of it. If you look at like track and field, if you're looking at the 4x100, is that last leg is a critical leg. And I think proposals really operate as that last leg. Like, you have to actually be able to help the team cross the finish line. So I think it's critical. We can't just rely on the business development team to give you information, you be able to solve it. You really got to be there as a whole, you're holistic to the overall team. So so let me move on here. So let me look at some of the internal things that that a capture manager really looks at. I think you really want to be able to focus internally first before you kind of go out externally, and I think that's a critical spot. You don't always want to be looking at the customer first and then kind of figure out internally where you are. Always want to be able to level set on the internal side first. So before we dive into that, I wanted to look at some of the data that's currently out there and what's looking at it from the RFP management. I think that this tells some really critical stories that are out there. So the ownership of the RFP process, and as well some of the common reasons for the losses. So if we look on the right first, is what are some common RFP losses? So right now it's the price. We lost to the competitor, and it's favored incumbent, and the product doesn't meet the customer needs. So those are the largest ones on that, and that comes down to like, all right, well, if we did a lessons learned on this, like that comes into a critical capture review on like, all right, how do we base our capture and our positioning of, well, did we price the product well? How were we on a competitive intelligence? Did we really understand where we were against a competitor? Did we really understand where we were, or did the client actually say, well, we would love to have your bid? Well, really, did we actually know who the decision makers were? Did they actually favor the incumbent because they've been doing work with them for 30 years? They were so entrenched within the organization that we never had a chance. They just wanted to have another bid in there, or did we price ourselves out of the competition because we never did our work on the back end? Things that are out of your control, but this is really on the business development team, because if it's really on the business development team and on the capture team to really do that, in the long term, you're submitting a proposal that takes up your time. It's hours wasted where you could have been working on a proposal that was ultimately could have been spent on something that was winning. So I think that really comes down to the focus of understanding where you sit. And this comes into, the gate reviews, it comes into, the presentation of document, and that will really show and for you to be able to have access to that type of information, which kind of leads me to the ownership of the RFP process.
Winnie, I got a real quick question for you here, because that graph on the right makes me feel suspicious a little bit. And here's why. Right. But I think it's worth us having a conversation a little bit about this, because at the top, we see that the price of our solution is typically named. Okay. Stereotypes that I think people here will notice is that a lot of the times we hear that price was the reason, but we may not be confident that that was true. Do you think that this data actually reflects how people are buying, or do you think that maybe do you think we're asking the right questions to know this?
So this goes back to, and this is more on the capture and on the business development side. And where it really is comes into maybe say in the color team reviews, and then the color team reviews really in the black hat reviews, where you're understanding where you are positioned with the customer. And you have to ask very blunt questions and understand where you sit with the customer. And so do you know the decision makers? Do you know the influencers? Do you know the advisors? Do you know where they are? Do you know what their budget is? Have you looked at their budget? How much are they spending? What are their current rates? Have you even asked them? Do you even know them? Because if you don't have that type of critical information, that is tough for you to be able to really make that type of, from the business development, from your pricing information, your pricing team, can we actually make a bid that can actually position us to win? That is very, very tough, because if you look down the line a little bit, you ultimately in the proposal team have to be able to put a bid together. But if you do not have concrete information that is beforehand, it is very, very tough. So a lot of that work has to be done a little bit more upstream.
Yeah, I think that graph is really interesting because at the bottom we see proposal quality wasn't strong is very low, right? Which
Very low.
really, so that strikes me about this graph because especially in the context of what we're talking about today, capture being so important. You look at the top 6 reasons that something's losing, and and it's not necessarily squarely in the capture manager's court, but it is something that's like related to work that happens before the bid. So I think that's just an important, like, I'm really glad you included this graph because it helps me understand to be like, oh, okay, this is a really important part of the process.
It is very, very, very important, and having very direct conversations, and those could be, so tell me about the customer, and say, well, Mr. Smith is, he's out of pocket. Be like, all right, I'm going to stop you right there. You're not on a first name basis with them. You don't know where they golf. You don't know where they go to church. You don't know all these little intricacies of them. Like, you have to be very closely tied to that customer to know, so they know who you are. I mean, almost to the point to saying, like, I want you to pick up your phone and call them right now. Like, how good are you? It's like, all right, call them and be like, all right, because they need to know who you are and you need to know who they are. If you don't know who they are, there's an assumption that they're going to like your proposal when you submit it. Why would somebody give you a multi-million-dollar deal if they have no idea who you are? I mean, and I'm going to get into this in a little bit of the later slides, the difference between, hard assets and soft assets. But I think that's a critical aspect is the capture manager has to push on that, because then it makes the proposal teams and their life, I have to say that too, the proposal team and their life very, very unfair, because they're trying to develop something that is very tough and selling something that is very tough based on work that needs to be done. However, if the work has been done, it makes your life a lot easier. So I think that's where the synergy and the communication needs to improve on where the gaps are. So
yeah, thanks for entertaining that little detour, because I think this is really interesting data. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then going to the left, it's really on the ownership of it. Ultimately, it is on ownership. The proposal team is definitely the one who owns the proposal. I get that. But it's also, I think, and I'd love to see more of a breakdown of it, is you can always need to make sure the capture and the sales team stay engaged with this, because there's a lot of institutional knowledge, knowledge of the opportunities and of the operations of the customer and of the data that has happened from this opportunity that's developed. Especially in federal bids, these can be developed over months and even over years. You need to have that historical information to be able to develop a lot of that information to be able to integrate it into your overall proposal. And if the proposal team does not have that critical information, it makes your life very tough. So how does this change if the sales rep is really the one writing it? Is that why the proposal writing wasn't strong, or there wasn't a clear communication on what needs to be in there? So I think it's a very interesting kind of look at both sides of it at the moment. So, but I just wanted to show that kind of, as I found this very interesting, things that you can control and things that are out of your control right now. So, so this is where I kind of want to go into an internal kind of conversation, making sure you're focused internally so you can understand your weaknesses and your gaps and what to address. And I think, capture managers always want to understand your internal aspects before you go out, just like in any team sports, because this is a team sport. And you really want to look at what can I understand. So when I do get a proposal coming in, I understand where our proposal team is so I can work with them, because you have to work hand in hand. I think is the number one thing from a capture manager's perspective, and working with the proposal manager is understanding to know your team. The capture manager wants to know the proposal team, the sales team, the execs, the technical. We have to know everybody. We have to know, we got to be on a good working relationship with them. Understand who's who. I call it who's who in the zoo. So like we understand like everybody, like who's moving around. We understand that, so we know how to where they are. If there's that is not a strong asset of your teams, I think it's a priority to make sure that's one of the first things you really have to capitalize on. And then going down a level, because I think there's the top tier, then there's kind of sub elements of everything. And then on the proposal team is making sure you have your best team on the proposal. I think that's one of the critical aspects. And from a proposal manager's standpoint, do you have the best team, on the proposal? Are you really putting your best foot forward when you're putting a proposal out? It's not just, well, who do I have available? Do I have the best team available to put this forward?
Yeah, Whitney, from a capture manager's perspective, what makes the best team?
So I think it's always tailored towards the individual proposal, and it's really who. So if it's really I have a Navy IT opportunity available, do I have someone that really, and we know that they're really focused on they're very visually, they're all about visuals. Great. Now I know to that detail, I need someone who's very good in visuals. Great. From the proposal manager side, having that communication, I want someone who's really on the visual standpoint. So I think having that type of communication back and forth with the proposal manager, understanding that it's like, oh, these are the only people we have available. Now let's put the best team forward that can help us get this across the line. I think that's a really critical aspect of this. From an executive perspective, it's really, do you have the right team available for this? Do you have the right resources and the right team to be able to help your business development team and your capture team be able to deliver a proposal? Because if you look at it from a business development and capture team, if we've been working on an opportunity for a year, a lot of time, a lot of travel, a lot of resources, energy, meeting individuals goes into this, and we've teed it up, and then we don't have the top team working on it, it's a hit to us. Like, all right, how can we really just make sure we continue to tell the client that we're going to be able to give you the best proposal forward? Because then that puts us at the top of the game, the top of the stack. Because if we're not doing it, somebody else is going to be doing it. So, I always got to think about the competition. How can I make sure we beat out everybody else? Because if we're not doing it, somebody else is going to be doing it. So I think that's a critical spot. Next one is, additional resources. Making sure if you don't have it internally, where can I make sure I have the consultants, the writers, the graphics? How can I reduce that friction before the opportunity comes in? And that's a conversation to have with the capture manager, because if we have opportunities coming in, where are they and where can it be? So say opportunity comes in, it's like, well, I don't have, the additional resources onboarded yet, because, maybe you have an internal process. It takes 2 weeks to get somebody onboarded. They have to go through a background check, have to sign an NDA and all this. Those 2 weeks are 2 weeks lost, that instead of actually having them onboarded, it's like, well, they're useless to me now because I needed them 2 weeks ago, and now it's useless. How can you help reduce the friction? So I think that's kind of something that really have a good understanding of what's coming down the pipeline for you. And then next, I really look at is the establishing the trust. And I think that's a critical one from an individual standpoint, is who can help me really motivate and lead through the proposals. And this is where you're working with the capture manager, understanding if there's any weak links or any gaps. I think that's really where you have the trust. And when a proposal comes in, as a capture manager, if I bring a proposal in, I'm always looking for having somebody really help bring this proposal across the line. It's really, you might have somebody on your team that you can really help motivate internally to say, like, hey, here on the proposal team, like, hey, here, can you really help us push this along the line? I know it's a lot of work and there's gonna be a lot of hours. Finding that individual person to help motivate it, because if I might not know the proposal team as deep as the proposal manager might, but really having that really good relationship can help me really do the extra work. Because I don't want someone coming in cold and say, hey, this has to get done. That can really affect a relationship. Who really has that good bond and that good relationship, really helping kind of build that. I think that trust can really go a long way.
Whitney, I've got a question on this real quick. What are the stakes if you, like, as a capture manager, if you don't get the right team? What's it gonna in this and you don't have that trust? What does it feel like for you? Or what
I would
happens?
say I wouldn't go as far as that cold sweat.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think it's really around the, am I going to get the product out the door that I want, and am I looking at the, what I'm going to be judged on, everything that I'm going to be
Mm,
judged on. It's like, am I going to be able to hit that? And I really want to make sure that it becomes more of my time of reviewing the little aspects of the proposal, and is that a good use of my time, a good use of the rest of the time? And it could be yes, but it's also, are we doing double work?
yeah. So
So
you really rely what I think we underestimate um how much capture teams and proposal teams rely on each other.
they do
Oh,
incredibly.
yeah.
That
Yeah.
it's incredible amount of trust, because we rely on both each other. But it's really, it's like, hey, I understand that you can do it great, but it's also having that good, open, transparent communication. I think that's always a very valuable one to really look at. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but,
Thanks
but
for describing that.
oh yeah, absolutely. And so you eventually will get to the point. I'm not saying it starts off, all great. Sometimes it builds to that, so like you can have a great relationship and great conversation. It might start off a little bit rocky, then you eventually build into it. Every conversation has its own dynamics to it, but eventually be able to get into that. The other one I think is a really critical one, is the schedules and priorities. Who's available, who's not available, where are they? I understand people have priorities outside of work, even though when a proposal comes in, that is usually the number one priority. Communicating that with your captured team. So it's always, hey, end of the year, everybody understands that proposals are going to be coming in hot. How many do you have? And it's not just who's available, but how many are coming in. Hey, we got 5 proposals coming in, but everybody has built up so much vacation that they're all going to be taking it. So you look at, well, I had 5 people available. Now I got 2, telling the team that they know if an RFP is coming, that like, hey, we have 2 people available. It's like, all right, well, how do we mitigate this? How do we make these changes so we reduce friction and we can plan moving forward? Because you want to keep your employees happy, and people still want to stay a little bit sane as they move forward, but you still want to deliver a proposal and deliver a absolutely great proposal. So I think it's a lot of that, the schedules and priorities. I think it's a critical aspect of communicating, not waiting till the proposals deliver and be like, we got 2 people. That's like, well, you're not going to deliver a quality product. So I think that communication is good to know. And it's, if people have priorities, great. Say, I don't care what you're doing. You have your real life. That's okay. You just got to let us know too, so we can plan. And then lastly, it's the creating the relationships. I think this is critical for both the capture team as well as the proposal team. Like, I'm all about, I will always I'll talk with anybody basically, but it's about communicating with your team, creating new relationships, understanding, finding common ground. Don't wait until the last minute to talk about a proposal. Just get to know people, to understand the dynamics, how they operate, who they are. Control what you can control. Don't try to control something you can't. So really understand, hey, talk about a proposal or upcoming opportunities, whatever it might be, but always continue to build relationships so you can establish more and more trust as you move forward.
Well, and Whitney, if I'm a proposal manager and I'm trying to work with a capture manager, genuinely a capture manager like you who's very competent, I'm going to want to figure out how to get on that A team, right? Like, how do I get on the team that Whitney puts together when this time comes? Because then I get put on the good opportunities. Then I potentially get additional commission. I'm personally on a commission-based structure right now in my job. So how do I get that additional commission? How do I move up the ranks a little bit? So if you're an ambitious proposal person, then if it's me, I'm like, I'm going to go find the best capture person and I'm going to be their friend. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's don't be afraid to do that at all. I'd also recommend saying like, hey, if you want me to take a look at that, I'm happy to review it. Don't be afraid to take
Ah,
because fresh eyes in proposals, I think if you know, fresh eyes are an absolute gold mine, because it's like that is a great way and an easy way, a very affordable way to say, hey, I'm happy to review your work. I'm happy to review it. I'm happy to give comments, because I'm not saying we're trying to put too many cooks in the kitchen here, but I think it's a great way to really be able to review ways. And then that is a great way to establish trust very easily. And then you build your work up, build your work up, build your work up, because it's not always like, hey, I'm going to give you a $100 million job, you know, right off the bat, but like build your way up and then grow your work, grow your work. But I think the fresh eyes approach is usually my recommendations. It's really easy to build your way up and then get your foot more in the door with the capture manager. It doesn't have to be on a proposal. It can be reviewing something as small as, hey, I'm going to be doing a presentation for a customer. You know, happy to review that. You know, something very small, like build your way up, because the trust does not have to be established on a proposal basis alone. Yeah, work your way up. And I'll tell you what, the capture managers, I think, would be very open to that. The ones that want to grow and succeed, that do not operate with blinders on, I think will be very open to it.
I love that suggestion. So just ask someone if there's anything that you can help them review and put into alignment according to whatever that opportunity is. And that's a good, that's an actionable piece of advice that I will probably go out and put into practice right away, Whitney. So
Yeah,
good,
absolutely.
good information there.
You think about it, it's like if they've been working on opportunities for a year, you know, they slowly they think about like, all right, I've been doing this for so long. Either like they've been heads been down. So it's like, all right, don't forget, like the client is going to be looking at it from more of a first time approach. So it's always good to get, you know, new eyes into it to be able to help them for the, you know, for your team to be like, oh, okay, this is what a new fresh eyes, how it's going to look clean, but also you bring in also different skills, a skill set that a business development person, capture person. That's why I think it's almost like a three-legged stool. So, all right. So
that's great advice. Thank you.
So, all right. So I want to kind of, that's really on the internal standpoint. I want to kind of focus a little bit more on the externally facing side of the house on this end. So I really want to make sure having a core understanding of your, you know, of your sales process, and really looking at this is really understanding where you and your team really look at, in your capture team, even on your business development team, sit when you actually engage on an opportunity. And what I've done here is on the right, kind of just put together a general sales pipeline. And this is everyone is kind of unique to your own organization. So this is very standard, and just kind of having an idea of capture plans. So let me kind of walk down the right side real quickly on the upside down triangle. So everybody knows you go from your leads, prospects, down to, you want to qualify those leads and eventually get to a demo. And eventually you want to get to proposal submitted and negotiation. You won the deal, then you actually close on the deal. I mean, you might have more steps, you might have less steps, but this is kind of, I put a very general pipeline together. There's an engagement usually where the capture manager and the business development manager, it might even go up to an executive, say, all right, we need to start to get the proposal team involved. And the capture manager, or however it's set up in your organization, want to start to engage you to start developing the proposal and developing proposal parts of the proposal. That could be the graphics, that could be any parts of it to really be able to kick you off. That's usually, sometimes it could be depending on the size of the opportunity, the exposure of the opportunity. Where do you currently sit, and is there a process of it right now, or is it, hey, we need to start working on this opportunity, and then it just drops onto your lap? It's like, all right, well, let's like time out on that one. Like let's kind of like back up. Is it all right? There's a demo meeting, and we have a very good we are very confident, and we internally discussed through a gate review that we are going to proceed on this opportunity, because then we understand what's coming through the door, through our capture plan and the documentation that we have put together. We understand the win strategy. We understand the hot buttons. We know the win themes. having this kind of documentation and communication, we can start to, the capture manager can also talk with the proposal team. Maybe there's a proper communication and engagement with the proposal team saying, hey, this is what we actually want to be able to do. And you can start to develop the proposal materials from the graphics to the discriminators. Hey, these are the types of graphics that we're going to need. Really being able to have, good situational awareness, what's coming down. So, from the, instead of just operating in a 30-day kind of mindset, you'd be like, all right, this is what's forthcoming. So I think that's really something, I think, to have a good understanding of your sales process, and a recommendation is always something to be thinking of. And one of the things is having your CRM access. If you don't have a CRM access, I definitely recommend it, so you can understand, from a planning perspective. If you have 15, opportunities in the demo meeting, and you're going to be going after 15 of them, like, okay, this is a good idea to understand that we're going to be moving forward on these. So that's on that one. And then this is I think a really important one that I want to kind of break down, following up from the prior slide, is really understanding kind of the hard assets and the soft assets on the capability breakdowns. I think this is critical on the capture side, and it's really, there's specifications and requirements in any RFI, RFX, draft RFP, in an RFP that you have to deliver. It's a measurable asset. And so that is what you're going to see in any RFP. So you're always going to see, hey, and I just listed a couple of examples. This RFP is asking for, data-rich software. They're asking for digital antenna units. This is a design, build microgrid for the Army Corps. That's an actual requirement. I need somebody that has a cyber IT administrator with 10 years experience, and there's a 27% small business requirement. I pulled these from a couple of different, these are actual requirements that are built out. So if you're responding, you have to respond to these. This is, it is cut and dry. This is exactly what you need to respond to. Everybody has to respond to that. Everybody gets the same advice. Everybody knows exactly what they need to do that. That is a little different than the soft assets, which is I call them kind of soft assets because they're non-technical. This is where we have to have intimate knowledge of your client and what is our best position to win, which I think is a little bit more important, because how do we know the decision makers and the influencers? What is our relationship? What is the pros? Also, what is the cons? Where is our key interactions? What are the hot buttons? What are discriminators with metrics? I cannot stress the metrics part enough. What are our discriminators with that? What are our win themes, pricing and budget, and past performance? I think this is so critical, because understanding that we need to know who the discriminators are, because just because we have a cyber IT administrator with 10 years experience, guess what? So what? Like, I can't tell you how many other companies have that same person that can do just that. My question is, who do you know? How good is our relationship? When's the last time you talked to them? Do they like us? Why us? But giving us such a key discriminator, because that is all going to go into a lot of items to our proposal. What are we, and there's, what is our marketing, or how are we marketing from a digital standpoint? What are we promoting on LinkedIn so people actually are looking at us? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can go into this, but why us, and who do we know? If it comes to find out that we're not very well liked in the industry, I'm not saying that, I'm just giving an example here. All right, well, excuse me, well, why are we going after it? Are there other individuals in this decision maker? The larger the opportunity, the more decision makers are. So what does the matrix look like? What does the map look like? How are we intertie? The capture manager really should understand the kind of the whole network of everyone. And I think that is very, very critical. And I will spend more time with working on opportunities, understanding the kind of the breakdown of decision makers, rather than on the hard assets, because we got to know who's who and how we actually our relationships are, because we'll find the 10 years experience and the small business requirements. And I'll tell you one last thing on the small business requirements. Worked on a job, and it was actually, even though in the bid it said this is for a state and local job, and it said, well, the job was 18, it said in the bid 18% requirement for small businesses. However, going through talking to the decision makers, it said it's going to be 35%. Don't even think about putting anything less than 35%. So minority owned, they better be in the city, don't go outside the city lines. And I was like, okay, but some people, not everybody, I don't believe everybody was, I think everybody was around 35%, but that's understanding the customer and the intimate knowledge of the customer. So I think that's, even though it just said 18, it was really up towards 35. So I think that's really just having a good understanding of everyone. So
Brittany, I've got to say, most of the time, what I get from a capture person is the stuff on the left, the hard asset capabilities, right? They bring me that stuff. That stuff's in the RFP. Cool. Like, great. You did the work. If I'm a good proposal team, I want to know everything that's on the right-hand side. And I think that's where I see so many sales teams because proposal teams don't understand what the expectations are upon sales teams. So we don't know that they are being expected or that they should be expected to go out and do this stuff. And I think where we can put some pressure, and not even, this isn't necessarily a negative thing, but it's like, if we're trying to win more work, you know, I can take this list of soft asset and capabilities that you've listed right here and say, like, if we don't have this stuff, I'm not going to be able to put together a good proposal. So how do we work together as a better sales organization to make that happen? Like, do you think that that's something that the proposal team could do? Is that appropriate, or like, how do you recommend approaching that?
I think it's a good question. I think it's a valid question, and I think I'm going to get into it on the structured growth section.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I think it's a good one, because the number one thing is you want to write proposals that win 100%. You don't want to write anything else. And you don't want to keep writing proposals where, you know, I'm just burning up daylight, you know, because I think this is critical on the soft assets section, is understanding who's actually cutting the check at the end of the day. I think that is the most important part. And part of that is, if you look at all of the bullet points below decision maker, is discriminators with customer hot buttons, discriminators with metrics. And discriminators with metrics is, well, we have, you know, we're a women-owned, minority-owned business that's been in business for 20 years and blah, blah, blah. It's like, so what? Yeah, that's not a discriminator. Give me something that really separates you from everybody else. Like, what makes you different? And that's where it's also like having a good understanding of that. And it's also, it can be a very open question that you can ask the capture team and the business development team as openly. It's like, what is going to position us for success for this opportunity? And another question you can ask them, it's like, all right, well, walk me through why the customer is going to want to pick us, so I can better write, you know, this section of the opportunity if it's not in the capture plan.
That's a great question. Walk me through why the customer. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, just walk me through it. Walk me through it, because that is going to help them put them into a tactical mode. You're like, I want you to walk me, hold my hand, and let's just like go to right along. Because you have to be able to break it down. I think that kind of like simplify it. And I think it's like, all right, because you have to know it to that level. And I spend a lot more time in the soft asset section, because the customer hot buttons are critical. If the people at the top have no idea who you are, who are making the decisions, why are they going to give you why are they going to give you a contract?
Absolutely. And I think, Whitney, to be like perfectly frank here. I think there are a lot of sales team who aren't empowered and enabled to do what we're showing on the right. Nobody like dives into this in a really meaningful way, which is why the organization that you have, why CribWorks is so important, and why companies that are out there like helping do that sales training is so important. Because I think proposal teams, we make this assumption that capture managers just know how to do this stuff, and especially new ones. I don't think that they have mastered a lot of these things yet. You've been in the industry for a really long time. You know what kind of like intuitively to move towards. And I think if we can help coach those people a little bit more effectively and say, hey, like your discovery like didn't really meet the bill on this, then and hold them accountable in a really gentle and growth oriented way, then we can end up with a better product at the end and less stress for everybody. So I really appreciate that you're breaking it down.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's always sub elements of all these, but always happy to go into more detail of that. So I'm going to look at this from a kind of a leading up to proposal breakdown, kickoff. I won't go into too much detail on this, but leading up to the proposal from the capture manager side, but also looking for proposal, but just never assume that a lot of work has been done before it has reached the proposal team. Always ask for documentation. Don't be afraid to ask for that. It goes back to the proposal, the capture plan and everything. Don't be afraid to share it and ask for it. And this is one I always preach. Don't spend time on opportunities where the customer has no idea who you are, because that win rate is going to be incredibly low, if anything. That's if an RFP gets dropped on your desk. I mean, it's just been in the industry. Everybody knows what that is. RFI sources sought. That's a different story. But I think RFP, we all know what the story with that. I think one of the critical parts is meeting with your BD and capture managers, really get a sense of the workload and internal needs. This is coffee, regular check-ins, come by and stay hi. One thing is really be proactive, not reactive. Don't wait for them to come to you. There's nothing stopping. I don't think there's anything, just like stay hi. Well, I think that's just something very, very easy to do. So just quick coffee. Something very simple on that, but just never assume that any work has been done. If nothing's been done, I think there's a mitigation strategy you need to take. Like, all right, well, how are we going to reapproach this? I know you want to go after it because it's in your, it's in your quota that you need to go after it, but how are we going to make a change? We're going to have to find another opportunity. I think that's what we need to think about, because last thing I want to do from a proposal manager standpoint is burn my resources to go after a proposal we know we're not going to win. So I think that's critical. From the kickoff standpoint, never assume the proposal is exactly how the BD capture team anticipated it to go. So you can't assume that, like, all right, this proposal is exactly how the capture team developed it. I think one of the things I found critical was have a review within 24 hours. If it's a larger one, 48 hours, depending on the day, and then have a true heart-to-heart go, because there's something that came blindsided. If there's a critical technical item that was put in there, is it really, you're really able to have kind of a decision from there on out. That can be from having HR in the room, from having, making sure you have a seat at the table, having the executive buy-in, really be able to have that person in there. So I think that's always something I really recommend, because, we've had items in the past like, well, this is a item in here that really goes against everything we promoted. So I think it's just really kind of having that item in there. During the proposal, there's lots of things that go on during the proposal. The only one item I really want to make it sure in here is the executive summary is so critical. And the capture manager is usually the individual. The one that I've always worked on is the one who writes it, but that is really the breakdown of what most executives on the client side will read, but it's also, that's really can make or break your whole proposal. So really working very closely with the capture manager to make sure that is very, very, that is polished. It hits all the, what really needs to do to accomplish it. So people will continue reading. We don't always know that how the proposal will be broken up when they actually deliver it on the customer side. We don't know if each section will go to individual people, and we don't know if each executive summary has to go to each individual people. Like, how is it going to be broken up? I think that's always something to think about. And then,
Highest, Whitney, real quick, highest stakes piece of your any proposal, in my opinion, is the
oh yeah,
executive summary. You've got it. Like if there's one thing that you're taking away from like the last 5 minutes here, is that like you've got it, you've gotta be
yeah,
a strong support for your capture person to get that formatting of that right. You've got to get it the messaging right. Like the executive summary is so high stakes.
yeah,
So just in my opinion, like I'm so glad you emphasized that here, because if we're not working together well to get that executive summary dialed in, we've lost the people who are reading the proposal.
absolutely. And lastly, the delivery of the proposal. I think standing shoulder to shoulder until the proposal is delivered, and then everything's going to be fresh in everyone's mind. I think from anybody that works across it, make sure you document everything on this. So I guess lastly on that, and then the last one I think I have in here is really on structured growth overall in this. So, capture has multiple angles for growth, and the number one thing is like you have to absolutely own it, absolutely own this proposal. The effort that you obviously put into this is something that be on your output. If it doesn't get done, that's really on your team. So it's like, well, this section didn't get done. Well, that's a critical aspect. So you as a team and as a capture manager, don't forget, it's not just the proposal. The proposal team owns the proposal, but it's also part of the overall team. So own it, own the proposal. You look at anybody that is not owning up, you really need to be able to make sure everybody's there. There's always going to be something to do. Make sure you operate with the mindset that everybody has to work as a team to get this thing across the finish line. So I think that is just something that really needs to be taken into consideration on that, and do the little things right. I think this is really something that, making sure you get to working on the small proposals, understanding what's right, what's not right, because when the proposal and the pressure gets larger and larger, timelines getting tighter, exposure, more executives, more eyeballs, the partners. I mean, this can get very, very big, making sure you've already done the small things and figured out where it's problematic and you fix that, because then it won't happen at the larger one. Understanding any KPIs that are achieved and understanding over the course of proposal. So I think that's a key one. And then lastly, or two more. One is you've looked at your proposal process. What has worked and what has doesn't. Is there a way for you to audit your proposal? Is there a way for you to be able to move quicker? You might have, I think Shipley's got about 96 steps. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure everybody uses that. Everybody's got their own proposal process. Is there a way for you to be able to move quicker? Is there a way for you to move more effectively? Because I think a lot of people would be open to, is there a way for us from the proposal standpoint, even in the capture standpoint, move more effectively throughout this whole process? I think that is something that you can really look at, because everybody's like, all right, we get a proposal in. It doesn't matter if it's a task order, it doesn't matter if it's an RFI or the proposal. How can we actually do this? So audit your own process. And last point on this is really data cells. And hopefully you're able to track your in your own team process. So if you want to make recommendations to an executive, or to a capture team on how you can improve progress moving forward, make sure it's data driven. Not just like, well, I think we should do this and do this. Use data. Let's say we have won these proposals due to this, and this, or we've been losing proposals due to X, Y, and Z. Data sells and metrics sell on that. And then lastly, I'll put on this is an all-around leadership. And I've definitely seen this. This is what one of my previous mentors have told me, is kick off every proposal with a positive attitude and perspective. And I think this is absolutely critical on the kickoff. How you represent yourself, how the sales team, the capture team do it. I think this is really, even the executives as well, this will affect the rest of the team. If you're super excited, this is something we can definitely win. You are fired up, you're there, you're open, you want to be working with people. I'll tell you what, that will play off on everybody else. If you just kick back, you're like, all right, we got another one to do. Like, all right, I think that will really be like, all right, we're just here. I'm not excited, whatever. But like people, that will play off on the team. So I think that's just how to pack a punch to get people motivated. I think so. The key part of leadership on this and be able to play off. If you need an executive to be like, hey, the team is down or the team needs to be motivated, we really welcome that. Asking leadership and executive for support on being able to push it forward, it should always be able to ask for that. And I think that's it. So that's really what I had on really how capture teams and proposal teams can move forward. There's my love to hear from you, and I think we got some time for questions.
Yeah, we've got some really good questions. I've been taking notes as they've been popping up. Whitney, I think so few of us actually get exposure to people who do your job and do it well. So I've been seeing lots of really positive comments coming up in the chat. The one big question that I think is on a lot of our minds as we start kind of moving into these recession environments, right? Like as things start kind of tightening up, some folks are either looking at reduced capture capacity or they've never built capture teams before. So if this is something that you don't have at your company right now, how can you help the existing folks to understand what they should be doing instead? Or how do you even convince your leadership that you need this function?
So if they don't have capture or they need to reduce it based on a recession, what can they do?
Yeah, like if they need to build, if
Okay.
they've never had a capture team before and they need to build it, how do they take that to leadership and say, hey, we could win more if you would just do these things?
I think it's a one way to look at it and one way to approach leadership is to put together a bit of a proposal on like how you would go forward with it, because it's not only that other companies are doing it, is that you want to be effective with your resources and how you win opportunities. And I think that is one of the most effective ways to look at it. Is if you're going to spend resources on, say, a capture team, is they are going to help you increase your win rate on opportunities that you go after. And they're going to be kind of also the link between your proposal team and your business development team to help you increase that win rate. So that I think is a critical aspect of it. Again, it's all tailored to those individual teams, but I think if you're going to want to increase your win rate and really, I think, improve your win strategy and how your organization wants to do business, I think it's a good way to start, if that helps.
Yeah. Well, and right now we're seeing all this news come in that like tech firms what is it? I saw this morning the average tech firms revenues are like 34% below anticipated volume. And you would think during this time that like, spending additional money is a bad choice. But I would say, and Catherine is the one who brought this up here in the chat. I would say that I think that there's probably a strong case for maybe like reallocating funds and hiring a capture person or getting your sales team additional training, or like because what's going to happen is if we don't get that sales mechanism dialed in, now the company's going to suffer even more, and now things are going to start spiraling downward. And so how do we get that executive team on board?
I think it's a good question. So say on a sales manager might have, say 20 accounts. Just use a federal, might have 20 accounts. Well, how can you be more effective with those 20 accounts? Are you going to win all 20 of those? So if you apply resources, it goes back to this right here. So are you going to win all of those accounts right there? Because my surveys say no, you're not going to win all of those.
Survey says fair.
But it's also about if you apply, because the business development manager, sales manager is, they're trying to hit as many as possible, but they are trying to go this way. They're not trying to go deep. They're trying to be like, all right, how many accounts can I close? And hitting as many as possible. But a capture manager is going to be able to go deep with opportunities, because there's only so many hours in the day, but a capture manager can take on a couple of those accounts to make sure that your win rate for those 20 accounts maybe takes on 3 or 4 of those. Like, I know with these large accounts, I know that I have a better probability of closing those accounts than that business development manager who has 20. Some of them are going to have a lot more than that, and it really increases it. And so I think that's just the way to look at it. But
I think
this
we
is
see oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I think we see executives doing the work like that sometimes, and they don't realize that they could hand off like people that are, I've worked at companies where the CEO, of course, I mean, having that zippered approach is really great. Like you want the CEO to know the CEO, you want the CMO to know the CMO, right? Like that's great. But so often we rely on our executives to do capture, and that's not their like. I mean, it can be a part of their job, but it seems like that's not what we would recommend in this case. Like maybe maybe as we start getting larger, we start thinking about specializing that function.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think it's a great way to offset a lot of your to increase your win rates. I think that's always what you do, because if somebody some of them have maybe a $10 million quota that they have to hit, it's very tough to continue to develop those leads if they know they have a couple of ones they know they can hit their quota. But if they work on these other opportunities just a little bit more, they can absolutely crush their quota.
Well, and let me ask you real quick. We can hire a consultant to do capture for us, right? On a couple key opportunities. Like you're the type of person we could do that with.
There's absolutely you can do that, because then they can become very, very focused on being able to do that and be able to grow that and look at opportunity, because capture looks at many different ways of doing it directly, doing it indirectly. Like how do we actually increase our win rate? I keep saying that, but that's really what it is. So I think that's something to really consider.
Awesome. Well, we are at the end of our time here. And that was the really big question that I wanted to tackle is like, how do we think about who we can bring in? Like, do I have to hire a full-time person? Can I bring in a consultant? Can I think about like, how do I build this out? What are the stakes if I don't? And so Catherine and Katrina, who were kind of asking questions about that, Victoria is telling us this is a great idea. Catherine says that was fabulous and very encouraging. So I think what we've done is we've left people with a really positive experience here. Thank you so much, Whitney, for being our capture expert. If y'all have any comments, questions, or words of wisdom, Whitney and I have been connected on LinkedIn for a hot second. I highly recommend going over and following both his business and his personal information over there. And then also, if you're interested in learning more about sales qualification, what I would love to recommend for you is that we've got a 30-day to a better go no go class that's launching. The link is in the chat, and we're happy to provide you with additional information about how to understand capture and lead and sales qualification. So we will see everybody in proposalindustryexperts.com. Thank you so much again for joining us today. What a wonderful group of folks. And don't hesitate, don't be shy. Join us on LinkedIn, join us in the community, and say hi to Whitney online.
Absolutely. Right. I really appreciate the time. And Phil, if I didn't get to your question, you have another one, feel free to reach out to me. My LinkedIn information is there. And no, I look forward to connecting with everybody.
Okay, cheers. Thank you so much on behalf of Pi, and we are out. Bye.